Welcome back to Book Break. I've got some great audiobook recommendations for you in this video. These are all going to be non-fiction audiobooks for you to listen to this year. Starting with some really great audiobooks to help you start the year off right. My first suggestion is How to Calm Your Mind by Chris Bailey and read by the author. It is no secret that anxiety levels have been skyrocketing over the last few years, so a lot of us need help developing strategies to calm our minds down. I, for one, am definitely going to be listening to this audiobook to help me calm down and get some sleep ever. There are lots of books on minimizing anxiety, but I think this one's really interesting because it's actually written by a productivity expert who realized that he had burnt himself out from pushing himself too hard. And so he really needed to take a break, rein it in, and calm his mind down, which did in turn make him more productive, along with all of the other countless advantages to giving ourselves a rest. So for that reason, I thought it was a really interesting angle on calming our minds down, and definitely one for the 2023 reading list. And while I'm transforming my brain, my next audiobook is going to be Thinking 101. This is written by the psychologist Woo Kyung-an, and the audiobook is read by Lessa Lam. Woo Kyung-an is a professor of psychology who has examined the ways that our brains get tripped up on our own biases, our own prejudices, and just on plain errors. She has then examined questions like, why do we think we're better prepared for job interviews than we actually are? Why are we not doing more about climate change? And why do we overthink when something bad happens to us? So the book has lessons on how to transform your brain and the way it works, and then transform your life. I'm going to have a whole new brain by the end of those two audiobooks. For a book to help you change up your dating habits in 2023, you could listen to How to Leave Your Psychopath by Maddie Anhold, which is read by the author, and this is being re-released as Red Flags. This is a really eye-opening book about quite how complex and subtle coercive relationships can be, and how easy it can be to find yourself in a toxic relationship with someone who gaslights you and negs you, and you may not have seen the red flags. And it is written from the author's own experience of how she had her own eyes opened. But the book is written in a really funny way. It's totally free from judgment. It's a really positive book about finding your way to self-discovery and a happier dating life. Or perhaps in 2023 you're looking to start a new hobby or learn something new, in which case I would recommend A Brief History of Black Holes by Dr. Becky Smethurst, and again read by the author. Becky Smethurst is brilliant. You may recognize her from her amazing TikTok videos and YouTube videos. I will link both of those accounts below. She is very funny and charismatic and really good at explaining complicated science things like black holes. I never had science teachers at school that used words like spaghettified. Or you could learn about some feminist history with In Defense of Witches by Mona Chollet and read by Alex Dunmore. This looks at historic witch hunts and then makes really interesting comparisons with how women are treated today and the types of women who have always been treated with suspicion. So it looks at the myriad of ways that misogyny has shaped our world. If your New Year's resolution was to take up yoga, then I recommend listening to The Yoga Manifesto by Nadia Jalani and read by Avita J. This is a love letter to yoga as well as a critique of the huge billion-dollar yoga industry, which has become increasingly inaccessible. Nadia Jalani is really passionate about yoga's potential to help people, so it will inspire you to get practicing, but she also points out the ways that yoga's modern incarnation has shut out people of color, working class people, and many other groups who helped create yoga in the first place. And so the book looks at what can be done to save yoga from itself. Another hobby that a lot of people will be focusing on this year is writing, and so a really great place to start is with Kathy Rensenbrink's book Write It All Down, and with the audiobook read by the author. Kathy Rensenbrink is an incredible memoir writer herself, and in this book she gives you all the advice and inspiration that you need to tell your own life story, to get your voice down on the page. So it's packed with loads and loads of practical advice, and it's really good for total beginners as well as more seasoned writers who just need help getting over certain obstacles. So those were all audiobooks that might have some impact on your own life, but But then there are the audiobooks for the times you just want to listen to a really fascinating story. So my first recommendation here is The Ship Beneath the Ice by Menson Bound and read by Charles Armstrong. This is the really extraordinary story of how Ernest Shackleton's ship Endurance was finally found, a century after it sank. So the story there, if you don't know, is that Ernest Shackleton's expedition to the Antarctic hit dangerous icy water. The ship sank in the freezing sea, but amazingly, all 28 men aboard survived. This is a story that has become the stuff of legends. But then in 2022, over 100 years later, Menson Bound and his team of explorers found the ship, nearly 10,000 feet underwater, and this is their amazing story of how they did it. And then for another survival story, 438 Days by Jonathan Franklin and read by George Newbern is about a man who got lost at sea for 14 months. Jose Salvador Alvarenga set out in a fishing boat that got caught up in a current, and he was not washed ashore for over a year. And in that time, he nearly gave up multiple times, especially after being passed by cruise ships and passenger boats that didn't see him and didn't stop for him. At one point, and this is fast becoming my worst nightmare, he contemplated suicide by offering himself up to a pack of circling sharks. But somehow, miraculously, he survived long enough to be washed ashore and tell his story. And he is still alive and well today. That is a story that simply must be heard to be believed. And then audiobooks can also be a way of getting to meet some really interesting people, especially audiobooks that are read by the author. Really gives you that feeling that you spent some time with them. So my first recommendation in this category is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zana and read by the author. This is the memoir that everyone has been talking about. It's all about Michelle Zana's relationship with her mother and her grief after her death. And it's told through stories of the food that they used to cook together and how this food helped Zana connect with her Korean heritage and connect with her family. It's a real tearjerker. Another author I think is amazing is Jeffrey Boakye, and you can listen to him read his own audiobook, I Heard What You Said. So Jeffrey Boakye is a teacher, and this book is his story of being a black male teacher within the British education system. In the book, he talks about some of the things that have been said to him, often pretty outrageous things, by students, parents, by other teachers. He talks about his experience as an English teacher of having to teach problematic texts, and he looks at how we can dismantle racism within the classroom. And then finally, one for my true crime podcast fans, you can listen to a true crime audiobook such as I Am a Killer by Danny Tipping and Ned Parker and read by Matt Reeves. This book is great if you want to explore a range of true crime stories because there are 10 stories in here of convicted killers, and the book is made up of material drawn from letters sent from prisons, from original police documents, from interviews with the killers themselves, their families, the families of the victims, and all of this together combines to create a really thorough, compelling picture. This is a book that goes some way to helping us understand what goes through the mind of a killer. So let me know in the comments below which of those you are most interested in, and if you have your own non-fiction audiobook recommendations, please do leave them in the comments. I will link here to a playlist of all of our other audiobook recommendations, so do click through if you're looking for some inspiration, and I'll see you next time.